Good morning, Satoshi-san. We see you.
Thank you, that's good.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us again. We'll start with probably setting up the scene for the rest of the day by talking very broadly and very strategically about what does it take to scale up sustainable finance in Asia. And perhaps I start with you, Satoshi-san. We do know and we keep repeating how important Asia is in the context of achieving the Paris objectives. And what does it take actually for us to establish this well-functioning and at-scale market structure to facilitate these financial flows going to Asia? And also, in the context of the importance of Asia and the recognition of the role that our region has to play, does this actually translate in influence and corresponding influence in shaping the global framework when we talk about sustainable finance?
Okay, thank you for those questions, and then I regret that I cannot be with you all in person today, but thank you for having me at this very esteemed conference. And well, actually, the answers to your questions have been already elaborated by Mr. Yu from the HKMA, but certainly certain missing point from his remarks is that while the financial regulators in Asia are making certain tremendous efforts to put in place a certain enabling regulatory environment for scaling up sustainable finance, but I think the real challenge comes from the kind of real sector, and particularly around how energy transition should be planned and implemented in Asia is a real challenge we have to tackle. And well, if you look at the certain numbers, for example, in China, there are still more than 1,000 coal-fired power plants, around 300 in India, in ASEAN region, around 150, and even in Japan, there are 90 or so coal-fired power plants. And given that the expected high growth rate of Asia's economy, and how we can provide enough sufficient energy to that economic growth, that is a real challenge. And while we are putting in place certain renewable energy facilities in the region, but in catching up the growing demand, well, we still use a certain fossil fuel-based energy. And in 2022, in China, around 100,000 megawatt new capacity of coal-fired power plants were put in place. So how actually we can design our energy future, and how we can design the energy transition to net zero, that is a real challenge. And in that sense, I think from the finance side, it is very important to design the climate transition finance in the way that will accelerate the decarbonization efforts towards net zero in Asia. And well, Japan is making certain efforts, but as a region as a whole, we need to put in place a certain regional framework for transition finance, so that that the energy future for Asia will be secured in the way that is totally consistent with our net zero futures. Thank you.
Thank you, Satoshi-san. Indeed, the challenge is tremendous. You quoted a few numbers, and I don't want to oversnow everybody with numbers. We all know them, but yeah, thank you for pointing out the scale of the challenge, and thank you for pointing out the need for cooperation and international collaboration. And that's actually a question that I would like to address to Sacha, perhaps. all regional and country-specific initiatives are no doubt very important, but since we're tackling a global problem, we need a global solution, or at least some coordination between our collective efforts. You, as a Vice Chair of IOSCO Sustainable Finance Task Force, and you've been involved in numerous discussions around ISSB disclosure standards. What do you think we still need to bring together everybody alongside on this journey for sustainability?
Well, first of all, fantastic to be back in Hong Kong in person. It's really good to be here. I think we need to take a step back for a second, and there's some positives. The first one is we need a global standard, and everyone says that, but everyone says that and then wants their own little change because that's what life is like. But if you think about accounting standards and how long some of those have taken to happen, we are going at turbo speed for the International Sustainability Standards Board. It was launched at COP26 in Glasgow only a year and a half ago, and it's already coming up with its standards, hopefully this year. This year. That's going to be one of the world records in accounting standards and disclosure. So that's great news. And to do that, we've had to see leadership. And I've been absolutely delighted to be Vice Chair with SFC, who've been showing, and Eddie said this here just before, Asian leadership. And it really has, and Satoshi has also eloquently said that. This is absolutely the way to go forward. So your specific question, what is the problem? And I think we've sort of heard some of the things. People said, well, my region is slightly different, or I have different bases. That's fine, but the metrics, the numbers, all have to be the same so that we can all compare and contrast. You might take longer. So one of the things that we as IOSCO and for the FCA here myself has been saying, you might not go at the same pace as us, or you might ask global companies to do something before smaller companies, but just make sure you're still on the same road. You might go a bit slower, you might have different lanes, but make sure you're not going that way. And that has been quite positive to see. Secondly, we need assurance. The whole point of this, if I'm a corporate, I want to set my annual report and I want to do my metrics, whether it's a bond portfolio, equity portfolio, or real assets and property. I want to know, compare you between others. And so when you've got asset owners and stuff in the room, they want to know whether they want to buy something that's really trying to improve and do something. And therefore we need assurance. So we're working very hard with the audit firms and assurance firms to make sure that these numbers are trusted. Because otherwise these numbers are great, but if they're not trusted, that's not important. And then thirdly, capacity building. Really important. We help train people. This is new, this is fast. People are worried, people are nervous when I speak to them about, but we're not ready yet. I haven't got all my scope 3 numbers, I can't get them off, well, nor can we. But we have to start somewhere, we have to at least push on this. So I think we're seeing really good leadership, we're seeing it here, and we're seeing it in other places as well. But we need to keep going, and we need to make sure that we give people comfort that it isn't, all the answers aren't there yet. But if we're going to solve this systemic issue, we need to keep going, and we need to keep going at speed.
Yeah, indeed. Great work has been done, but a lot is still ahead of us. And perhaps, Ms. Ruenvadee, you represent a regulator in ASEAN country, and regulation and the role of regulators will certainly be critical in this journey. How do you see your role really, and what do you think you should be doing and you've already done to actually facilitate this transition?
Thank you, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me here. And like other speaker mentioned, it's good to be back to Hong Kong. Haven't been back since February 2019, I think, 3 years already. And as you asked, I think I want to echo EDU and then echo Satoshi-san and Sacha that we as a regulator, the role that we play definitely is not to regulate, but to accommodate, to facilitate. The key word is about ecosystem. We have to make sure that for the Thailand market and the ASEAN as a whole, that we have the appropriate ecosystem to facilitate the businesses, all size, big and small, to go ahead with the sustainability. If you allow me, I want to touch upon the Thai market first. we set up the goal, the flagship of the sustainable capital market, like the other colleagues worldwide. What we have done so far, my team and I, with the cooperation of our stakeholder, we set up the 6 ecosystem, starting from the issuer themselves, from the supply side, and move to the investor demand side. And the product, the product, we remember well, starting from 2018, for Thai market, the green things, seem to be quite zero, But up to now, we have about 16 billion US dollar already, and then start to grow even higher than this. And the fourth one that we have to make sure of the greenwashing is about have the external reviewer. We have to have the local one, in order to make the cost become competitive for the local issuer. And the fifth one is about information platform. Everyone needs to look into the data, you see, and if possible, like Mr. Sacha mentioned about to compare. And last, but very important, is about cooperation within the country, within the region, and within the global. Luckily, we as a regulator, we have the IOSCO, to be what you call a platform for us to work into that, for this part of the Thai market, and then for the issuer, luckily that they are very committed for the green, Luckily, Thailand, like other country, we start having a mandatory requirement for disclosure, even though starting last year, but it's never been delayed, no late, we could start already. And you can see the vibrance of the transparency in terms of the climate related and as well as the human right. I'd like to touch upon the human right because right now in Thailand, we require all the listed company to go along with the so-called business and human right according to the UN, And so that you can see that in the one report that we call, we asked this listed company to disclose sustainability report to be in the what you call specific section, a part from their financial data. This is a part of the Thai market, but we cannot stop. It's a journey. We have to do it again and again. Moving to the Asia, but I think that Satoshi mentioned already, if you allow me, I touch upon ASEAN. Luckily, I've seen Khun Eugene is here also. You can hear from him in the later session. But ASEAN, we have a very committed group of the so-called ACMF, ASEAN Capital Market Forum, which my colleague and myself, we fly to Indonesia, since the Indonesia colleague is the chair of ASEAN this year. I think that we could complete the roadmap of the ASEAN sustainability initiative on that, We have done so many things. If you allow me to touch upon a few points. Taxonomy is a key, taxonomy, because we have to make sure that we talk about the green, everyone sees the same green, dark green or brown or whatever. We complete already for the taxonomy in the first version in a very, what you call, general framework. Because if you can notice that ASEAN, the progress and so on and so forth, there are some different, but the taxonomy, we have to make sure that it can be pragmatic and can adapt in every jurisdiction in the ASEAN, and also make sure to comply with international one. Interoperability is a key as well for the ASEAN taxonomy. We complete already for that, but the final version gonna come afterward for the specific sector. Second is about the standard of the product, Right now, I think that we have If you allow me to look on the note, otherwise I might forget. The financing tools, I think we're talking about the sustainability linked bond. We have the ASEAN standard on that too. I think that for regulator, we, as I said, committed to this. But one thing we have to remind everyone here that investors themselves have to fully aware as well. I have no doubt for the institutional investor asset management, but we have to fully focus on the retail one, and then I think right now for raising awareness among the retail investor, make sure that we have a right product mix to attract this retail investor is a key. Last but not least, that Mr. ADU mentioned is about capacity building. In ASEAN, we also have the network to enhance the understanding amongst the regulator and also perhaps the stakeholder as well. I'd like to end my talk, the first round here. But we need to do more, cooperate more within the country and in the region and in the global level. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruenvadee. Indeed, we see a lot of work being done in the ASEAN countries, and as you pointed out, further down the day we'll have other speakers talking about other geographies and other regional initiatives. But before we turn into this, first one remark, I like what you said about not regulation, but to accommodation and facilitate actually the ecosystem. This is a very good remark. So before we turn to the rest of the questions, I just wanted to ask Thijs. We heard from Satoshi-san, Sacha, Ruenvadee about our vision and our kind of policy and political kind of overarching framework of how this should happen and what the big challenges are. You are representing one of the biggest wealth management pension investors in the world. And from your perspective, you've been doing a lot of work looking at where investment should go and especially in a long-term investment. How do you see Asia as an investment potential? We know now we have to look beyond just returns of investment. There is expectations for sustainability, there is regulatory compliance and some kind of, expectations from the society. How do you see Asia? How does it look on the map of the world as opportunities?
Yes, well, great to be here. For me, not great to be back. For me, it's great that occasionally I can travel abroad without too much issues. Maybe I think the words of Eddie, who said, you can do well, but also do good. I think that's very much what we strive for. And in doing so, we have 3 objectives. And actually, all of these objectives have already been touched upon, because the first one is that we want to measure. Yeah. And that might seem trivial, but actually it's not. There's lots of difficult questions. Carbon, we're working on that, but we already get questions on how is your portfolio contributing to biodiversity. Well, that's a tough one on measuring. So, but you need to measure because you need to see if you make progress anyway. So that's the first one, measure. Second one is we clearly steer our portfolio to sustainable companies and to sustainable activities. And then we also engage with the investee companies because there's always room for improvement. So we clearly see that investing towards sustainable activities, companies, and still engaging with them to make further improvements and to keep a check on what's going on and the progress that's being made, that's clear as well. And the other one is that we invest directly into activities or companies or initiatives that facilitate the energy transition. And then, taking that into account, how do we then look at Asia? And going to your question. First of all, Asia is not a homogeneous market. Broadly categorizing it, you could state that we've got developed Asia, Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, Singapore, and we've got more developing regions such as ASEAN. And you could argue that that for us in wanting to do well and good, there's lots of opportunities. We heard the numbers, so I think there's more than enough opportunities to do both well and good by investing into all kinds of infrastructure initiatives within ASEAN. And I think that region has a lot of potential because they might be able to leapfrog some of the steps that the more developed nations had to take. They're very fossil fuel intensive, and there's an opportunity to maybe leapfrog these countries in energy supply and the energy resources that they are using. So we see Asia very much as full of opportunities to invest in, and both achieving decent returns, because ultimately that's what our participants need to pay for their pensions. But we also realize that the Netherlands is a very small country. Half of it is below sea level. So that's not something we can take care of just by ourselves.
Thank you. It's great to hear that Asia is full of opportunities. That's what we also think, and that's why we're all here to actually unpack this a little bit and to facilitate seeing these opportunities and making the most out of them. We talked about the objectives and we talked about the challenge, and there's clearly a path. So, Sacha, perhaps a question to you. We know where we're heading. The finishing line is clear, but the road to this finishing path is still not certain. And you talked about how we shall take, if not the same road simultaneously, at least walk the same direction and walk in parallel, shoulder to shoulder. I'm just wondering, the question of transition and transition plans is more and more kind of in the air, and we are all kind of approaching it from different directions. A lot of the companies are now having targets. Almost all countries have declared their national targets, but we are still unclear of how we're going to get there. What do you think we should do in order to really have the same road, although perhaps several lanes?
Okay, so I've been an investor and an asset owner for over 25 years and a regulator for a very short period of time. So just give me 1 second. But the fun of my job over the long term has been when you meet amazing companies who do really good things and show you real things. But you also meet many companies and many people that say something, and words are beautiful. We know words are beautiful. But then when you delved into it as an investor, as you would do, you start finding that there's some flaws in the words that they use. And therefore we need numbers, we need plans. And so it was wonderful at COP26, especially where everyone signed up. Everyone signed. And as I said to some of the CEOs, it'll be 5 CEOs away before we get to 2050. So it's nice, but what are you doing now and not what are you doing in 2045 that matters? And so transition plans. So we came up in the UK with saying, well, how can we help this? A practical step, not just a nice signatory to something. And so we came up with a transition plan task force, which is now published and is out there and is being worked on by other people, with international companies say, if you are going to say a plan, can you all put the same things on how much of yours is going to be a carbon offset? Now, we're not telling you, especially not in 2023, what the answer is, but if I'm an investor, I'd like to know why in the same sector someone's carbon offsets is 90% of their plan and another one is only 20%, and that will be then transparency to make that difference. So it's coming, it's happening, it needs to be done, and it needs to be internationally. This is not that difficult. Your plan might be different, the numbers might be different, but surely the things that you are putting into that plan, if they are using ISSB, using the same standards, it could be compared. And I think it's very important because there has to be some cynicism when people say that they are going to do something, to say, can you just show me what are you going to do, and what are you going to do by 2030? Because this plan shouldn't just be a 27-year plan if it's 2050 or 2060, but your plan should be showing me what you're doing in the next 3 or 4 years. And especially the most important thing when you're doing something so long, what happens if you get lost on that road? What's your plan B? Do you have a map? Do you have your, your car charger with the system on there, the map, to make sure that you can then get back on track? You need to have that plan, and you need to be able to show it. And that helps for transition finance. If you're a bank or insurance company and you've put a plan together, you're only as good as the people that you're investing in. And therefore, we all need to do this. So we're working very hard with this transition plans to give people the tools. And if we've done the work, you can look at it, and other international regimes are looking at this, because then we can do some of the easy work for you so you can speed up and catch up.
And that's very much why we feel engagement is so important.
Yeah.
Because that's very much the check on the plans that people signed up for. Is it really happening, yes or no?
And I think the point that we make as a regulator, and we're not telling companies or institutions to sign. They already have. Our job, though, is to say, if you are going to make these commitments, and if you're going to advertise them, and some people advertise them at airports and many other things when I'm coming everywhere, can you make sure that you actually do these things, not just put them on adverts? And so that's where the regulator tries to bring some standards.
Indeed, the road is actually not so long when you're thinking that we're just 27 years. As you said, a few CEOs away from the final line, and we're still deliberating where we're going. Actually, that's a bit scary. So perhaps Satoshi-san, following on Sacha's introduction to the path to 2050, 60 or 70, whatever our finishing line is, how do you see the challenges really addressed? I mean, there are things that can be looked from different perspectives, from corporates, from financial sector, from governmental perspective, from overarching kind of economic system, and how we transition to something which is less carbon intensive. Where do you see the main challenges?
Right. Well, I think, Asia is certainly a heterogeneous region, but Asia plays a certain role in manufacturing the many products for the world. That is the common theme that Asian nation have to tackle. And in that sense, we have many decarbonizing technologies and certain production capacity for achieving that in Asia. But, as I said earlier, because there's a certain uncertainty around energy transition in Asia, there may be a certain possibility that, while we have a technology or production capacity, but we produce such manufactured products in a very high carbon emitting way, and that could hinder grasping those opportunities, because there may be many big companies who would like to decarbonize overall their supply chain. And if that is their wish, maybe, they may try to build their own capacity in other regions than Asia. And actually that's happening. For example, in the Inflation Reduction Act of the United States, it's certainly envisaged to build up the certain decarbonizing production facility in the United States. And so that is a real challenge that Asia is facing. And if that is the case, I think we need to showcase that the Asia as a region can decarbonize their production capacity and their overall value chain in Asia. And in doing so, we need to put in place a certain credible model pathway for carbon emitting sectors in Asia. And that is what Japan is doing. We have developed certain sector roadmaps for the high carbon emitting sectors, and to show that what benchmark should be used in judging whether certain companies is on the credible path towards net zero. And so we developed for that for Japanese companies, but we need a certain common benchmark for assessing the decarbonization pathways for the Asian companies as a whole. And that will certainly enhance the credibility of the Asia's transition to net zero. And regulatory communities should collaborate together with establishing that kind of framework in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Satoshi-san, and thank you for actually bringing the attention to the companies and to the industries which will actually have to decarbonize, because we sitting at the side of financial sector, all investors, we are all dependent on the actual businesses which will do the work more than anybody else. So this brings us perhaps to the question of incentives and who and what sort of incentives we need to make sure that we are all actually heading to the same direction. And perhaps here I ask Ms. Ruenvadee, what do you think the role of regulator and your role in Thailand is to incentivize this journey? I mean, there are things that a good regulatory framework is on itself an incentive, but perhaps there are other things that we could be doing collectively to help each other.
Thank you. As you point out, a good regulation is one of the good incentive. But as a regulator, I think that Satoshi and Sacha can share. We don't have much, especially for the financial one, financial incentive. But I just want to make sure to you that for us, as a Thai regulator, even though we charge a very minimum amount for the approval of filing fee, but to incentivize the company, back in 3 years ago, we start to charge zero, give free of the filing and approval. At the first year, we want to make sure that companies rush into this, because it's a window opportunity, even though it's not that high. But I think that we continue to give this waiver of the filing and approval fee for the company until 2025. When we do a survey, we get a good reception on this. They said that even though it's low, but at least regulator give something, give something, give a take, But the very important incentive, I think, is to be supportive to them, especially for the capacity building, for the knowledge sharing, this part for our internal market. For us, we invite all the company stakeholder, the practitioner, academics, so on and so forth, to come to the seminar, and even though without any registration fee. This is part of the capacity building that we do. Second is about to create effective infrastructure. I think Mr. Eddie mentioned this morning about bringing blockchain, for the bond issuance. Likewise, in Thailand right now, we together with the Stock Exchange of Thailand, Association of Security Company, and the Association of Thai Bank, they are the main operator. Right now we have sandbox already for the bond issuance, not only for the simple bond, but include the green and sustainability bond as well. Further than that, we want to have the distributed ledger technology bring into the Thai capital market. This is the second incentive that we can do. But third is about the regulation as a whole for the ASEAN country. As I said, that ACMF, we built this platform back in 2020, and even though we have direction, but it's not only just a plan, there is achievement and progress. I think that along the line after the 2020, we see a lot of achievement from that. And this is an incentive given to all the issuers in the region. But I like to raise a very important challenge. I think that Diana is one thing that we need for sure to think about incentive giving directly to the supply chain and small and medium enterprise, compared to the big one. I have to admit, everyone here, I think that you see the same thing. It's cost effective quite high for those companies, This is the thing that I would like to invite all regulators to think about, Even though SME perhaps not yet become a regulated entity in terms of the issuing the IPO, so on and so forth, but they're coming very soon, and then they are catalysts of the economy in our region and as a whole. Right now, for Thailand, we ask the large company, because the large company, they can't transact, they can't do business by themselves. They have millions of the supply chains along the line. So that we ask all the top 50, top 100 of SET, the Stock Exchange of Thailand, the listed company, to make sure that you bring about the awareness among your supply chain, and if possible, incentive that you can give. Not only trade finance, but so on and so forth. You make sure that SME supply chain of your line come along and go along with the sustainability objective. I think, but one thing that is things that we still have to think about and come to the plan and make sure that it's going to be pragmatic one and can do it thing, the SME and supply chain. I think that still be a key that for our colleague at home to think about how to make sure that we can go along with this. One very recent initiative that we have a crowdfunding platform, Right now, the small and medium enterprise can come along, and also they have to disclose. But again, we have to look into that more deeply on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruenvadee. That's really good to know, and really I see you doing a lot, and I'm sure the other regulators that we'll hear from today are also doing their bit. I just wonder, Thijs, you are the one who are facing perhaps the most those corporations, being small or big, investing in them. And when we spoke earlier, and I asked you why you're here, why you need to be here, you said, I have to look at people's eyes when we talk about this. Yep. So what do you see when you look at people's eyes? What do you see? Are they scared of what's going to happen? Are they, I don't know.
Well, that might be a good thing, because that might push them into action. But going to the question on regulation, we see very much that regulation is a necessity. It's a prerequisite to create a proper ecosystem. Because however large your trust in financial markets is, but the invisible hand will not solve this transition. So it's important that we create nudges so that people are starting to do the good thing, and that helps them to do well in that respect. So you can't do that without regulation, in my view. So that's a necessity. So also, for example, in ASEAN, I think there's still some room for incentives, and it would be great if we could see there that there were incentives in place to help the transition from fossil to renewables, and that you see that there's a reward for making the right choice, and it might even help leapfrog some of the other developments or steps that other economies had to go through. And especially because you touched upon small and medium enterprises, well, those are the firms that we can't engage with. There's just too many. That's not something. So we talk to the large corporates as well. So they do feel the pressure, but also for these small and medium enterprises, then it becomes very much an indirect type of system that we need to create to also make sure that the nudges, that the incentives, that the incentives are there to help them to do the right thing. And that helps them to do well in that respect. So it's important that we create nudges so that people are starting to do the good thing, even though SMEs to do the good thing are in place there as well. Therefore, we take up our responsibility and look into, do banks, if they provide financing to companies, do they take these type of things into account? But for us, it's not a possibility to engage with small and medium enterprises. So regulation and maybe via the supply chain would be great steps to also help that, because we sometimes forget that, but small and medium enterprises are in most countries the largest part of the entire economy.
Yeah.
I find it amazing that when we do any research or anything, people say, we want you to regulate. It's not often you hear that as a regulator, but people are always saying, this area we want you. So we're very happy.
Indeed, this is indeed an interesting phenomenon, and just perhaps shows how people still need direction. And this comes to the questions that have been raised by Eddie and by all of you about capacity building, education, and actually making sure we all walk the same path. And we're almost running out of time, but I just want to have one final question, and I'm not going to address it to anyone, whoever wants to respond. There's so much happening, and so much is actually industry-led, despite the fact that, as we said, we need governmental and regulatory intervention. But still, industry seems to be very active and front-running on this whole agenda. Yet, we do have a lot of accusations for greenwashing. And I just wonder, I know from our members, a lot of them are being challenged without actually, well, having ill intentions for, and really being challenged for trying to do something good. I just wonder, where is this, the source of this misunderstanding between what the public is expecting and what we all think we're doing well, and yet we've been criticized?
Well, maybe it's not just accusations, I'd say. There's also some actual greenwashing going on.
When they look in your eyes.
Yes. So again, another point why engagement is important, not just relying on report, but indeed look people in the eye. So I think, of course, it's grown, it has become very popular, and that brings some excesses as well. And the good thing is, again here, that regulators are stepping up and trying to impose clear guidance on what qualifies as green and what doesn't, because if that's not in place, then it's easy to say that you're trying to do well and good. But so recent regulations from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority is a step forward, but you do see that across the globe it's becoming much more clear when can you label something as green and when you can't. For us, actually, that's not even that important, because we have this intrinsic motivation that we want to do. We want to generate returns, but we want to do that in a sustainable way. And then if it's labeled green or not yet, well, that if it's not yet labeled green, then we just need to push harder with the investee companies to make sure that it will become green.
I think the other thing is, any industry that's grown rapidly, we see in capitalism, people get excited.
Yes.
And they sometimes, like a teenager, they over-promise. And therefore now it's time to bring the ground rules and the guardrails and the regulation to try and bring that. But it's done from a position of people want to, because they want to, show that they're doing things, but we need to bring that together, and that's why we've talked about the things we have.
Fantastic. And on this note, we'll have to, since we called the elephant in the room, we have to conclude here and give the chance for the rest of the panels to deliberate in more details the topics they have in front of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And please enjoy the rest of the day and stay with us so everybody can get
Thank you.